All right, today is Friday, April 17th, 2026. My name is Wallace Bowie III, and I'm here with Pastor Foster of Calvary Baptist Church. Pastor Foster, can you introduce yourself and share your connection to Calvary Baptist Church?
My name is Lawrence Foster. I'm pastor of Calvary Baptist Church and have been so since 1994. So I am in my 32nd year of continuous ministry at Calvary.
Um, when you first came to Calvary Baptist, what was your your very first impression of the building, when you saw it for the first time?
Well, it was different. It was nothing that I had previously seen. And actually, I came to the church to preach several times before I was called to be pastor of the congregation. And the interior of the church was a little different. It was actually green. The carpeting was green, the pews were green. They were pine pews, but they had a green finish to them. And for me, initially, it was a bit off putting because it reminded me more of a gymnasium with the abundance of green. After which, I started falling in love not just with the people, but with the building. I like unique, and certainly Calvary is unique. It is a departure from conventional ecclesiastical architecture. So I started studying. Became aware of Gunnar Birkerts, who was the designer for the building, and the pieces started falling in place. The baptistry, which extends from one end of the sanctuary to the other, is dramatic, but it is designed to be a replica of sorts of the Jordan River. And so that was intriguing. The mirrors, of course, were very, very different because I had never seen a mirrored facade. But the mirrors are to capture the people who sit in the congregation and actually challenge them not just to love God, whom they have not seen, but to love their sisters and brothers, their neighbors, people whom they see every day. And then the open design, it's a minimalist design in the church, but the not just the mirrors, but the windows allow us to see the community. It helps us understand that harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. We are to call on the Lord of the harvest to help us gain a positive advantage in the community. And if we see people walking by, we pray for them. People can walk up if they have a need. We attempt to meet that need. So we are not a sequestered setting. You can look on the outside and you don't lose track of. So those were things that helped me fall in love with the space and the place that I serve. The outside of the building, of course, is painted orange, and that is for purpose. If you notice, Detroit is not really an elevated city, it's mostly flat. But in our neighborhood, we are elevated. If you drive up the street to the Coleman Young Center, it sits on an elevation. Elmwood Cemetery has elevated spots in its 86 acres. And we too are an elevation. And so that's reminiscent of a city sitting on a hill that is compelled to allow its light to shine so that people might see our good works and glorify God. So we have purpose in all of this. And of course, the vivid color of the exterior gets people's attention. People tell me all the time, I drive past that church every day. And we probably have 50,000 commuters that drive by the church on a daily basis, especially Monday through Friday. So you can't miss it. And if you go to the top of what we used to call the Renaissance Center, you can see the church. It is definitely a landmark. So, all of these things, a lot of times we respond in fear to what we do not know. And we have negative assessments. But when we get to know something or someone, it changes the game completely. And there's not a place, and I know that there are other beautiful campuses, other beautiful facilities. But for me, there's not another place I'd rather be. I have preached on 4 different continents, but there's not a place I'd rather be on the first day of the week than at Calvary.
You answered like 5 or 6 different questions that were on my list. That was beautiful. I do want you to talk a little bit more about how would you describe the feeling of worship inside this sanctuary compared to other churches? If you can, go further on that. And also, how does light in the sanctuary affect how people experience the space?
First, uh, the sanctuary is deceptively large. I mean, it's not massive. It's a space that can accommodate about 500 people comfortably. And I have discovered it definitely takes some doing to fill the sanctuary, which is good. But it also simultaneously creates an intimacy. I mean, we've got fabulous acoustics in the church. And with the interface of natural light, people can sit in the sanctuary for 1 hour, 90 minutes, or 2 hours, given the occasion during the day, and they can get their daily dose of vitamin D. That is precious because when the spiritual and the natural interface, we have holistic ministry, we have a holistic encounter. People leave there feeling better than when they came in, and they may not perceive why. They may think it's because of the music. They may think it's because of the spoken word. They may think it's because of the fellowship. But it is the meeting of heaven and nature that really blesses and empowers people. I think that we probably have a very healthy congregation, both emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, because of sitting in that room on a regular basis. And then we have all of the green space outside of the room. So it is it and the other thing is if we understand anything about uh, Egyptian architecture, and we know that there are probably more pyramids in sub-Saharan Africa than there are in North Africa, but there is an energy and intentional energy just based on the design of a pyramid. I mean, and I can't quite explain it. I don't have that technical sophistication to explain it. But I know that there is healing that comes because of how the building was designed. And it's done me well, and it's done many others well. So I'm grateful that we have that kind of consistent interface and encounter when people come into our sacred space.
What have you learned about why Gunnar Birkerts was chosen to design this church out of all the architects that could have? What do you know about that if you know?
I do not, but I'm glad he was chosen. I think that those who were on the building committee, and keep in mind, we really wrestled with new construction. There was a group of people that wanted a brand new church, and they wanted a church built from the ground. They did not want to inhabit a space that others had occupied. And even today, Detroit is filled with empty churches that at one point were teeming with life. I mean, our footprint has gotten smaller, and there are other contributing factors. So we had an opportunity to go into another existing facility, actually two, one in Palmer Park, which was a Jewish synagogue, and one that was a former Baptist assembly or church, Covenant Baptist Church, on James Cousins near 7 Mile, where Hartford Memorial Baptist Church is. We actually had first dibs on that property, and we had the money. And but there was a real spirited discussion. And Lawler Juan Burt was pastor at the time, who died suddenly. He had he was stricken, and and he was like 52 years old. And when he was removed from the scene, the church was left without the kind of leadership that would have guided it more smoothly, I would say. But when the dust settled, the majority of the congregation decided they wanted to stay in the Black Bottom community. We were previously situated at Joseph Campo and Clinton, but when Mayor Cobo and his gang decided to displace Black people from Black Bottom and carve it up with I-375 and 75 North, we had to, through eminent domain, we had to give up our property. We received some monies, but thank God we had a very strong building fund. And we took the bold move to build from the ground so that anyone who followed us would understand that an African American congregation built this. A lot of people come even to this day, and they think that we have inherited someone else's structure and someone else's land. But this is something, and to their everlasting credit, no group is perfect, no generation is perfect, but the two generations that preceded me did that right. And how Gunnar Birkerts was identified, I do not know. I don't know if there were other architectural firms that were candidates, but someone heard of Gunnar Birkerts' reputation, reached out to him, and one thing led to another. He agreed, and he wanted to design a space and place. This is how visionary he was, that reflected the souls of Black folks. I can borrow that title from W.E.B. Du Bois. That's what he wanted. And I'm so glad that we said yes to it. And so this is what we have.
That is very interesting. I did not know that you all were going to acquire what is now Hartford, the building. That is, and it's a common pattern for a lot of churches that experience displacement or even when they were, have experiencing growing pains to acquire, the Jewish synagogues. Um, but that is a huge accomplishment, yes, to build from the ground up. Wow. Okay. Um,
And if I can say as an aside, before I became pastor of Calvary, I served with Dr. Charles Gilchrist Adams at Hartford from 1981 until my call to Calvary in 1994. I worked very, very closely with that congregation. And to this day, those who remain, who remember, uh, are near and dear to me because our congregations uh, commune, fellowship often. And so I love Hartford. I love the Hartford family.
Yeah, that is definitely a blessed ministry. So were you there when they were doing the Agape House and
All of it,
the credit union? Nice.
all of it, all of it,
Nice. Okay.
all of it. As a matter of fact, I was the founding dean of the Hartford Institute of Biblical Studies. We had a lay school of theology there, and we had over 300 students, a faculty of 9. We bring in scholars from around the country and around the world. We produced a generation of church lay leaders and ministers and pastors and scholars. But that's not what we're really talking about today. But yes, it
I'll,
was those were very wonderful times. And they prepared me because I've only had one pastoral assignment in 32 years, and that's Calvary. I've not pastored another congregation. I went there without any pastoral experience, but I had a great foundation because of Dr. Adams and and Hartford. I won't go back any further. I had other influences, but
feel
specifically that.
free. Go ahead.
Yeah, specifically that. But I've been a part of some wonderful congregations. I mean, my home congregation in San Francisco, Third Baptist Church, another congregation that built from the ground, where Dr. Amos Brown recently retired. It's the oldest Baptist church west of the Rockies, organized in 1852, and it is still going. And they have a new pastor now, and that's the church that nurtured me. And then when I was in Atlanta attending Morehouse College, I was an active member at Ebenezer Baptist Church initially, and then Friendship Baptist Church after that. So I had the influence of Daddy and Mama King. I mean, they took me in and treated me like their son. And then William Guy, Jasmine Guy, the actor's father, was pastor of Friendship Baptist Church. These were extraordinary ministries. And because Spelman College was founded in the basement of Friendship Baptist Church in Atlanta. So yeah, I've had a lot of good rub off on me. I won't give anybody the bad, but I thank God for the good. The bad is on me, but the good is on those who have poured into me. But it provided me the ability to work with people, to deal with people, to grow with people, to to overcome conflict and keep moving forward, and above and beyond everything, to continue to love people. And so that's where we are, and we are forward facing, looking forward to a great future. And my time will soon come where I will pass the baton, and but the church will be in good shape, and someone will even have a clearer runway than I had, and the church can soar and excel as a result.
The greatness of your leadership is explained by, yes, the churches and the people that you sat under. Okay, we're gonna have to do a separate oral history one day on Hartford because I want to know more. And then Third Baptist, yes, that okay, Reverend Brown, I met him in San Francisco years ago. Super knowledgeable person. Third Baptist, they have this interesting sanctuary with yellow stained glass and they have a
Yes.
gymnasium. And I took an architectural tour of Third Baptist when I went a couple years ago for a conference. Oh, that is an incredible church. And I didn't know either, too, that Reverend Haynes was the pastor there before. And his son is a pastor in Dallas. And I met him for Easter. So
So
that
let
is
me so let me go one step further.
okay.
His soon to be congressman Frederick Haynes III's grandfather was my pastor. Then Dr. Haynes' father was my pastor, and Dr. Haynes III and I essentially grew up together. So we're family. And then of course um, Dr. Brown, who is intrepid and extraordinary and still going strong even at this point, and his beautiful wife Jane. These are people that helped shape me and form me, and I'm grateful for it.
You got me jealous over here. I wish. They when I went to Third Baptist, they gave me these multiple souvenir journals. And I was just looking at the history and I was just so amazed. And I really didn't know who Reverend Brown was when I met him. I just remember we had got off of a bus and he had this African cloth on with this staff. It was beautiful. And he was just talking about the black church, and it was a specific Black History figure who had his birthday at the church. I forgot, but he was just talking about the black church. I recorded all of it, and he walked us in there, and I got a picture with him. But it's just the history of just that church is incredible. Okay, it makes sense. It makes sense.
My family has been in that church since 1942, and this is 2026. So we go back 8 decades.
Wow. Okay. Um. So let me see. Have you personally added anything to the space that reflects African American or diasporic identity to Calvary?
There hasn't been much that I have done. I mean, we did a major makeover about 20 years ago where we changed the color scheme in the sanctuary. We kept with an earth tone. And so we installed pews uh, that were naturally stained, brown carpeting. I mean, we've done a few things to kind of upgrade. The church right now is just going through. uh, an infrastructure redo because we're nearly 50 years old. And what was functional and working real great uh, is not so much anymore. We put in a lot of money because you really can't do the exterior embellishments if you don't have your infrastructure. So we've put a lot of money in recent times in things that can't be seen, so that when we go to the phase 2 and really give the church a polish, then the foundation will not give way proverbially. One thing that I am very godly proud of is that we have preserved a great music tradition. When Black churches in urban America inherited predominantly white spaces, unfortunately, there was very little appreciation for the historic instruments, especially pipe organs. That was not the case with Calvary. When Calvary was on Joseph Campbell and Clinton, there was a pipe organ, and we made it a point to identify musicians that could master the instrument. We had a full range of music and always have had great music down through the years. We could not bring the pipe organ from the old church to our setting. And I don't know if it was about proper fitting, whatever the situation was, it did not come with us. It was ultimately demolished with the building. But we had great music lovers, and they went to work to see if we could find a pipe organ. Jesu Church in Northwest Detroit had a pipe organ that they were ready to sell because they wanted a new instrument. So we negotiated with them. The very first organ that was in our church came out of the Hines estate, the old church, Heinz ketchup people. You know, they had a huge compound outside of Pittsburgh. And, you know, back in the golden days, the Gilded Age, people who had a lot of money, they just had, they would build, you know, chapels on their grounds, and they didn't have to go down the street or across town to go to church. They would build their own churches. So the original organ came out of the Heinz estate. And at that particular point in 1946, 1947, a couple of Beacon's trucks went to Pittsburgh and brought the organ, the console, and all of the pipes and everything to Detroit. And I think that we spent maybe about $20,000 for that instrument. Maybe quite, but in 2026 money, that was an extraordinary investment. So when we could not bring that organ with us, we negotiated with Jesu and we brought their pipe organ to Calvary, purchased it fully and installed it. And for a number of years, the organ was not played. When I first came to the church, because I had been exposed to great organs in my other congregations, I wanted that organ to be refurbished and I wanted it to be played. So, you know, during the honeymoon period of my pastorate, I was able to convince the congregation to put some modest money in, and we were able to get the organ up and running. But we needed to do a major overhaul. And the amazing thing about it is we had proposed to do that in 2019, not knowing the future, not knowing the pandemic would hit, that would derail a lot of projects and plans. But we persisted. And even though the church was partially shut down and that, we were able to solicit monies, not only from members of our congregation, but people like Dr. William Picard and others, bless his memory, who had a relationship with me, appreciated Calvary's history, and they sowed into it. And we raised tens of thousands of dollars, and we restored the organ during the pandemic. And we recommissioned it. It is a great instrument, and that instrument is insured for over $500,000. We have a special rider on it. So if something happens to the building, uh, we'll get something for the organ as well, but just to preserve it. And we have a separate fund for the maintenance of it and that kind of thing. So that is something. And I pray that whoever succeeds me will value all types of sacred music and would continue the effort to preserve that. I was at Hartford when the Petty Madden organ was designed by Dr. Jimmy Abington. And, he left us too soon, but just one of the greatest African American musicologists and preserver of Black sacred music. But that instrument I know cost every bit of $750,000 when it was installed. And Dr. Marilyn Mason from the University of Michigan and others participated in that. So Black folks have always been able to do everything. There isn't anything that we can do. I mean, we can go from Bach to rock. you know, I mean, we can sing anything, we can do anything, we can build anything. We are just extraordinary people. And I want us to appreciate, at least from my little perch, I want us to appreciate all types of music. And so we have become a destination. I mean, the Brazil Dinar Chorale, you name it. We hosted the National Association of Negro Musicians annual or opening session when they came to Detroit last summer. And some of the best musicians from the African American experience were in this city, but also at Calvary, for their opening worship experience, because they know that that's a good place to be for music. And we've had people who have left money in their estates so that we could carry on the music tradition. And we have used that money judiciously and have added instruments that really enhance what we offer. So, yeah, we've got more to do, but we're making progress. And I think, and then the other thing is we retired the mortgage during the pandemic. We are debt free, and that's a blessing. We control our own destiny, and we don't have to worry about a bank, calling in the loan or anything. During the pandemic, I mean, those are the things that if my memory fades, and if I don't know my name, I pray that I'll always remember how God can work through a pandemic. And because we have many pandemics, little pandemics during our lives. But if we trust God, God will bring us through stronger, wiser, and better.
Yes, y'all were most definitely favored during the pandemic. Oh my goodness. Wow. How did, if you know, how did members of the congregation first react to this building when it was completed? What was their first reaction?
Many of them embraced it. Some of them saw it, as too neo, too modern, not churchy enough, no stained glass windows, all of that. And but the majority of people were connected to community, and they did see it as a great place to worship and to learn and to grow. We've had some great times there. So the overwhelming majority, I mean, when the designs were rolled out and that people were looking for things more conventional. But I'm glad that the majority, because we are a congregationally driven church, the members have the final say. I mean, led by the Spirit of God. I can present, the various boards can present, but the congregation has the final say, which means that the congregation has got to be informed and educated and not just respond emotionally. So it does create, and it has nothing to do with class, it has nothing to do with pedigree, but it just means that people have to be more engaged in a setting like ours. And I'm grateful for that. I want people to know what they're walking into. I don't want them to, buy a pig in a poke. I want folks to know what they are doing because we're in this together. So, yes, the overwhelming majority of people loved it. And, I love the fact when grandchildren and great grandchildren from the ministry come back home, they they fall in love with the place all over again. So it's good.
And that leads me to my other question. How do members talk about the building today?
Some call it the Orange Church, and I don't despise that description. You know, when we repainted, the church has been repainted once. It needs to be repainted. The exterior needs to be repainted again. But when we went through that process and we put the base coat was a very, very dark brown. And of course, it had to cure. So once the base coat went on and there was no orange, everybody went crazy. They thought that that's how we were going to keep it. I mean, even the directors, the board of trustees at Elmwood reached out to me and said, we use the color as a landmark. We tell people how to turn into the cemetery. Are you going to change the color back to orange? And I mean, it was the craziest thing in the world. Now, I understood the process of putting, a base coat before you put on your finishing coat. And that's why the paint job has lasted as long as it has. But yeah, it's a landmark. I mean, I tell people all the time, I said, we are the orange church. I don't get into all tech. I don't say we're a truncated pyramid and we're Afrocentric. I meet people where they are. I said, we are the orange church sitting on a hill between Elmwood Cemetery and Martin Luther King Jr. Senior High School. People never miss us. So that's like $1 million worth of free marketing. We're the only orange church in the whole doggone city, in the whole metroplex, in southeastern Michigan, in southeast Michigan. We are the only orange church anywhere. Who can beat that?
That is true. I was at my school's library, the Bentley Historical Library, and I'm looking at some slides that comes from the Birkerts firm. And someone took a picture of Detroit. I don't know what building they were in. It was elevated. And like in this wide city view, you can see the small orange building. And it's just like, yes, it is a landmark. It's hard to miss.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me see. What do I have? Were there any features or ideas that were originally planned but never completed in the building?
Well, yes, the sanctuary was supposed to be larger. It was originally proposed by Gunnar Birkerts that we build a sanctuary accommodating 1,000 seats, a chapel, 250 seats, suite of classrooms, about 1,400. I'm sorry, 14 classrooms and office spaces. Some of that did not happen. And I think that it didn't happen. Well, there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, we were between pastors. At least in every church that I've been a part of, if you have a dynamic pastor, it makes all the difference in the world. So we were between pastors. The mortgage for what had been envisioned was like $10,000 a month. What we settled on gave us a mortgage of $8,000 a month. Now I'm sitting in my armchair being quarterback. I said, now if I had been there, would have gone for the $10,000 because it's just $2,000 more. But sometimes people can't see without someone casting the vision. And I think that practicality, I think that fear masked as practicality won the day. And I think that would have had if we could have a do-over, we would have stepped out on a little more faith. That's just my humble opinion. However, it's never too late. I mean, we've got enough green space. If we needed to stretch out a little bit more, we could do it. I don't see that as my assignment. I'm just grateful that there is a footprint so that that structure is not abandoned, but it is in time built upon or added to in some way that is complementary to the style. I looked at getting a national landmark designation for the church because not only in light of the significant architecture, but the giants that have come through the church. But when I saw that if we did a national historic designation, that's one thing to have a state marker. You know, we can go to get our state representative, to put a marker on the church grounds, which I think is important and appropriate. But when you get when you're on the national registry, you can't do anything to the building. You can't add one more seat. You can't change colors. You can't do anything. It's like the historic sanctuary at Ebenezer in Atlanta. You can't do anything. That sanctuary seats 800 people. That's it. It's just it. They can occasionally worship in there if they'd like, but that's why they have the Horizon Sanctuary next door. And it does not have any fetters or chains to it. So whatever Pastor Warnock and the congregation wants to do, whoever succeeds him one day, they can do it. So I had a conversation with the congregation. I said, yeah, I know we feel good about ourselves, but I said, let's not lock ourselves into something that we can't get out of. And so we did not go for that.
Yeah, because like
But
you would have to get permission if you did want to make changes. Yes. Yeah, I've heard of that process. And I was like, yeah, why
yeah,
don't you all have a historical marker? Okay. I see. I see. Let me see what else. So you've kind of spoken on because the other question was going to be, are there things you would still like to see added to the space today? I guess another question would be, what challenges have come with maintaining such a unique building?
Well, it's just the wear and tear. I personally live in a home that was built in 1912, 1913. And trust me, the maintenance of historic structures are not cheap. So you really have to go after streams of income. And I think a lot of us don't realize it. And maybe for years I didn't. Maybe I thought that all I had to do was depend on the goodness of the saints when we passed the collection plate on Sunday, and that would be that. But you really, honestly, in this day and age, you have to have additional streams of income that are dedicated for the maintenance and upkeep. You have to tap into foundation money. You have to, if you have to encourage the saints to leave the church in their estates. It's a different calculus now. And if you don't do it, then everything just starts piling up and adding up. And then you have to rob Peter to pay Paul. You have to make really difficult decisions, and you're instead of being proactive in terms of maintenance, you're just reactive. You have to put buckets out in the sanctuary when the roof starts leaking instead of having people inspect the roof on an annual basis, to catch things before they happen. Those are the things that I have learned that has that they just have to be put in place. Um, I look at at historic churches, and because I love greenery and I love architecture. I just anyway, there are churches that may not have 20 people that worship regularly on the first day of the week, but they have an endowment, and they know how to use that money for the upkeep of the building, because what they do, they may have Tiffany glass, stained glass windows, they may have a Casavant Italian pipe organ. So they monetize that. So when tour groups come in, they have a little collection box and that kind of thing, but they know how to keep things going and still worship with the hope that people will return to the city, the footprint will get larger, and these buildings will be ready to accommodate them. That is something that we have to do. We have to have these conversations, and we can't do them sequestered from each other. You know, we have to come together as congregational lay leaders and say, how are we going to survive together? Because, for example, the Lilly Foundation, they do some occasional standalone if it's compelling enough for individual congregations. But if they see that a couple of congregations are coming together for youth and young adult programming, or they're going to do something to serve the underserved, or whatever, they're just much more open to that, and will even provide resources for the space and the place to carry out the activities. So we have to get smarter. We definitely have to get smarter. I have learned that lesson the hard way, and so at this particular point, I'm doing things in consultation with the deacons and trustees and other lay leaders in the congregation. We're just doing things a little differently now. and it is having a positive impact. So, I mean, because I want to see this, I want to see the campus preserved. I don't plan to be rolled out of the church. I want to walk out. And then one day when I walk back in, I want to see it thriving. I want to see it beautiful. I want to see it the way it ought to be. I don't want to be selfish and just drain the congregation of all of the resources. And then when I leave, I shake the dust from my sandals and I never turn back. That that is so selfish. And that's how I attempt to encourage the congregation. I said, if you've been sitting here 40, 50, 60 years, it should not be over when you are physically over. I mean, because if you really think about it, the reason why you're sitting here today is because of the sacrifice of someone before you. So we have to learn how to pay life forward, especially with our institutions. We just have to. And I know that it breaks my heart when I read about Rosewood and Tulsa and Greensboro, North Carolina, Atlanta. I mean, we have had centers of economic development. No one should ever, just a casual reader of history, should never say what we can't do and what we can't achieve because we have done it. But in those days, there were no laws to protect us. There were no insurance companies that could pay on our losses. Uh, so it was a miracle that we were able to do anything, and we did it. And so, what's stopping us now? Even though the the environment is hostile, it's certainly not as tough as it was 100 years ago. But we have to have a made up mind. We have to decide that because of and in spite of that we're going to do and that we're going to we can create. I realize the historic disparities. I wish that one day this nation would come to its senses and pay appropriate reparations and that kind of thing. But in spite of that and without it, there are still so many marvelous things we can do together if we would just put our egos aside and make up our minds that if you fail, I fail. If I succeed, you succeed. We're in this together.
That is so good. That is so good. I got a couple more questions for you. I'm not going to keep you all day. I mean, I don't mind if you are preaching. But let me see. How do visitors typically react when they see the building for the first time?
They are in awe. They just, I mean, sometimes we have to pry them out of the church. They want to take pictures. They just they love it. I mean, and that makes me that makes me so happy. When people uh I mean, I'm there during the week attempting to do what I'm supposed to do. And people will ring the doorbell and they'll just want to come in. They'll want to take pictures. They'll want to talk. And we don't turn anybody away. So yeah, people love that space. They absolutely positively love it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think I took over 400 pictures when I came. So
Yeah.
I get it. Have other churches or leaders come specifically to see or study the design?
This is interesting. Those from the wider community have come, but not those from within the community have come. I mean, they're there, they give compliments, but nothing as studious, uh, as really studying, wanting to know the history, wanting to know the background, wanting to collect any uh, promotional materials that we have. So, like, and maybe it's a generational thing, but even within those who are younger than me in the work, they look for other types of environments to model their ministries after. I still don't understand to this day. Every church I've been in has had natural light. I don't want to be, I may get in trouble. I don't want to be in a church that looks like a casino. You don't know, there's no clock. You don't know the time of day. People are turning down the lights to set a mood. They're playing all of this Count Dracula music in the background, to psych people up. And that's just not my cup of tea. I mean, when you think about Jesus, he probably spent more time outdoors doing ministry than he did in the synagogue or the temple. He was an open air pastor. I see that's the other thing I like. I mean, when the weather gets right, uh, we can set up a tent, we can have outdoor worship. There are just a lot of things that we can do that maybe in an urban setting a lot of people can't do. Now, when you go down south, a lot of colleagues, I mean, their churches are sitting on 5 acres, 10 acres, 15 acres, 20 acres. I mean, they could actually do farming and all of that other kind of thing because they've got the footprint. I know that here it's a little different. And then when you go to New York and you go to Philadelphia, where everything is side by side, you're lucky to have a flower bed. So I get it. But I mean, just in terms of the design of the church, I just don't understand. And I understand maybe the architects now say if you want maximum energy efficiency, you don't have windows, you don't have this, don't do this, and don't do that. But anyway, I mean, when I see the secular cathedrals, when I see what General Motors desires as a space, Atlantis as a space. When I see what Dan Gilbert constructs, plenty of light, plenty of windows. It's supposed to be the light of the world, which means that light's supposed to emanate, it's supposed to come from us, but we're supposed to also receive light. You can't receive light if you're if there's no light source. That's just my little critique, and I'm certain it's not popular, but that's all I have to say. So nobody. Short answer: there hasn't been any brothers or sisters who have come to me and say we want to model our church after yours.
Are there any memorable visits? Are there any memorable visits or guests that stand out to you that may have came to that building?
Oh gosh. Well, we used to regularly worship with Rosa Parks. Mother Parks loved Calvary. As a matter of fact, we had a Rosa Parks Day, and it was an interfaith encounter. And we had all of the major religious traditions there and the like. I mean, we organized a series called Living Stones, and we identified people while they were yet with us. People like Don Barden, the Three Sixes, a group very similar to the Radio City Hall Rockettes that would dance at the $100,000 or the 100 grand club. I mean, Irma Henderson, just we've had so many people that have come through that time and memory would fail me. But yeah, we've hosted quite a few very interesting uh, and notable people. But my favorite is Mother Rosa Parks. I just have to say that. And things that I can say on the air and things that I can say off the air. But I would say that out of everybody who has come our way, she, just because of her humility and her graciousness and everything else about her, she was my favorite. Absolutely.
Wow. Do you think the building itself plays a role in how people experience God?
Absolutely. That's going back to the energy. That's going back to the light interface. That's going back to the construction, that the truncated pyramid that brings the force and the power of God in that place. There isn't anyone who leaves there disappointed that they have come that way. I mean, even people who have visited for the very, very first time, they leave there and they say over and over again, this is just a beautiful place. And what I love about it is, you may agree or disagree, but I love the fact that it is minimalist. I mean, it's not like rococo, not gaudy, just clean lines. I mean, you feel like you can breathe in there. And of course, the plants contribute, because when we are expelling carbon dioxide, they filter it and then they return pure oxygen to us. So it's a very healthy environment, too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very all the nature. That's what I was looking in the windows and the back. Yes, it's a lot of the succulents, cactuses. I was seeing it. It's beautiful. Yes, it complements the space well.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that this building could have been built in any other time period, or was it specific to that moment in history?
It was specific. I don't know if the building would have ever, the concept of the building would have survived another time. I just believe that. Now, Gunnar Birkerts built another church, the St. Bede's Parish. I believe it's on 12 Mile in Southfield. And when the archdiocese closed that facility, beautiful church, not quite like Calvary because it wasn't a pyramid, but it had beautiful lines and designs there. And the emerging Black community, just, well, I called Southfield North Detroit anyway. There were enough Black folks to take over that building, but Black congregations didn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And ultimately, it was razed, it was torn down. And now a strip mall is there. Gunnar Birkerts he said, not me, he said that out of all of the projects that he worked on, and he worked on projects in his hometown, in Europe, Detroit, other places, Chicago, and the Midwest, other places. He said that this was his favorite project. And if he felt that way about Calvary, that is high honor. But I don't think, I really honestly, because if it had been me, now very seriously, I would have contemplated such a design. Just, so that's why I tip my hat to our ancestors who were bold enough. I can imagine that they were talked about building that crazy building. Wow, it's orange and I heard people say it's not even a cross on the lawn. What is this? So yeah, we caught some heat when the building was constructed, but it didn't deter us. It didn't, and I'm just so glad. I'm so glad someone was bold enough to do what they did in concert with a brilliant architect. And I'm not quite certain that they had envisioned. I would imagine, because I knew some of these people when I got there 32 years ago. They weren't they weren't wrapping their heads in red, black, and green, and they weren't wearing kente cloth. So I'm not quite certain that they had the. I think that God just planted something in Gunnar Birkerts' mind, saying, "You all have a history. You all are soulful. This is what I would suggest you do, and you will have something that generations will come to appreciate." I wish that I could have met that guy, really, for real.
I wish I would have met him too, because apparently he used to teach at U of M. He used to be in the School of Architecture, and I think he passed away just a couple of years ago.
94. He passed away. It hasn't been 10 years. I don't even know if it's been 6 years.
Yeah, yeah.
But I read of his homegoing. I clipped the article. We put it in our historic archives.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, I
Yeah,
wish that I could. Well, even though I didn't meet him physically, I feel his spirit
yeah.
every time I walk in that building.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does amaze me. That was a jump because when you see the Gothic architecture of the church that's on, Clinton Street. I was looking in this, I think it was the Jubilee program of Calvary. You're in there. There's a young picture of you standing in front of the church or near the tree outside. There's a picture of the old facility, that has a stained glass window. It's
Right.
massive. And then, just to see that jump from that to this, it is fascinating. And I just, how black churches and stuff, they want tradition, and that is amazing to see. Yeah, that is very interesting to me. And then
And
also, okay,
sometimes, and I'll just say this, sometimes we not only want tradition, but we want to mimic culture that doesn't necessarily embrace us. I think that for example, what uh, Dr. Wendell Anthony and Fellowship Chapel have done, they've attempted to be much more Afrocentric and intentional in the construction and the design of their campus. And I definitely appreciate that. But that's rare. It's rare. And Freddie Haynes, if you get a chance to look at Friendship West's campus, he's attempted, to do something that is a bit different. Jeremiah Wright, Trinity in Chicago, they've attempted, not to just go along to get along. But these are pastors that are intentionally Afrocentric. And it does make a difference. It makes a huge difference.
oh my goodness. So, there's an architect. My mom, she has a research organization where she documents the work done by Black architects, and there's an architect. One of my favorite architects that she researches is Nathan Johnson. And one thing that he says, I've met him before he passed, he was in his 90s. One thing that he says, he doesn't like colonial architecture. And it's interesting that you said that, Calvary built something that reflects the culture and how a lot of churches build something that doesn't reflect their culture. These colonial style, buildings with steeples and stuff. But that was that's interesting that you say that. Yes, Fellowship Chapel, beautiful, beautiful Afrocentric facility that has these roofs that looks like pyramids at the front. And even when you look in the pews, it's African, textile or, that's on the pattern that's on the pews. Even the bathrooms are beautifully designed. And just when you walk throughout that whole building, it's a conference center too.
Yes.
When you walk throughout that whole building, and that was built when I was born, 2005. I know the architect, Mark English, that did that. Yes, I've been to Trinity in Chicago. I've seen the stained glass that tells the history, our history. And I've seen the sanctuary is actually supposed to resemble an African hunt too. It's beautiful red carpeted sanctuary. I went to Friendship West for Easter this year, so that's when I met Dr. Haynes. And yes, they have pyramids at the front on the top of the building, and they have these gardens, I think, that has like uh African like plants in them or whatever, but they have a large campus. They also have a conference center. Yeah, I love when those churches have the intentionality of Afrocentric elements. I love that. Yes, very intentional. Um, oh yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Um, okay, I'm gonna do three more questions and I'll be done. How does this building reflect Detroit history, especially Black Detroit?
I just think that it taps into the heart of Detroit. Now I'm a latecomer. I came to Detroit in very first time, 1976. We had a debate tournament here at Wayne State University, and I was captain of the debate team at Morehouse. And actually, we had connected with Spelman, so we had a combined group, and we came. It was late winter, and I had not been exposed to the city. But I'll never forget going to, on Saturday evening, we went to the Renaissance Center, saw Black culture at its finest. The place had just opened. Black folks came there all dressed up. They had on furs. It was like they were just sitting and hanging out. And I was so impressed. I never wanted to be in Detroit because I've always grown up in mild to warm weather. That's another story. Nonetheless, uh, came back a couple years later, and that was 1980. Dr. Adams had lectured at Harvard, his alma mater, and we ran into each other. And he invited me to come and do youth work at Hartford. Got to Detroit, and I said, "This will be a nice experience. I'll be here maybe for like the summer, and that'll be that." But when I saw the culture of the city, when I realized that at that time, the Detroit public school system was not only the fourth largest system in the country, but it was rated by US News and World Report the fourth best public school district in the entire country. And Arthur Jefferson, a deacon at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church, was the superintendent. Dr. Adams exposed me to Coleman Young. That's how I realized that Coleman Young grew up at Calvary. You know, he fell out of church, but he got back in, at least his name, at New Calvary, which came out of Calvary. He and Charles Butler were great friends. every and I thought that Atlanta had it going on in terms of black businesses and black culture. I got to Detroit. I said, Lord have mercy. I said, I have died and gone to chocolate heaven. I love this city. I just I love it, love it. It's been through so much, but there is a wonderful spirit here. And everything goes through ebbs. I know that a lot of people left. People go to Houston, they go to Atlanta, they go wherever they're grown enough to go. But in every grandfather clock, there is a pendulum and it swings. And see that this pendulum is swinging back in our direction. I mean, I'm grateful that Mary Sheffield is mayor of the city, looked at how she has organized her cabinet. I mean, this is a good place to be. We have issues. We still have to work on things. But just this city has contributed so much to the world. It is, when someone asked me, said, "Do you work for the Chamber of Commerce?" I said, "No." I said, I said, "But if I'm a part of something, I'm really into it." And I said, "I'm really into this city. I just am." And Calvary has played a huge role since 1919. Just a quick story. James Henry Maston was run out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, because he was a race man. He would preach about Black people and preach about we will overcome for years. And it became so uncomfortable for the lay leaders of the church, that they asked him to leave. They said, you keep talking the way you're talking. I mean, this man was born in 1874. And when he was pastoring in Chattanooga, I mean, he was fluent in classical uh, Black English. He called Negroes back then Black people. It was unheard of. He pastored Second Baptist Church, he pastored Union Baptist Church, and he left Chattanooga and came to Detroit. He was a part of the Great Migration. And he was married once, never remarried, had a daughter named Susie. He came and he connected with Robert Bradby, who was the godfather at that time. I mean, Robert Bradby had Henry Ford on speed dial. And Bradby built that church. I mean, he took Second Baptist to the stratosphere. He had the largest men's ministry, probably out of any Black church in the United States, because Bradby would go down to the train station 1 to 2 days a week. He'd bring a little band with him, and they would play, and they would welcome the folks when they got off the train. They had, temporary housing for them. And Bradby said, "Come to Second Baptist." He specifically to the men. He said, "If you want a job, come to church Sunday." And then after worship, he would talk to the hundreds of men who would come to church and said, "I can get you a job at the foundry." He says, "But I've got to vouch for you. And that means that you've got to come to church, that you've got to be reasonably sober." He said, "If I get a job for you, then you're going to have to help build this church." So during Robert Bradby's heyday, Second Baptist had 6,000 active members. We talk about mega churches now. Listen, Second Baptist had it going on. And Maston was one of Bradby's pulpit associates for a minute. But Maston was so brilliant, he realized that a lot of people who wanted to come to Second Baptist, who were living in other parts of Black Bottom, could not afford the streetcar fare. A nickel back in 1919 could buy you a whole loaf of bread, could get you a dozen eggs. You had to pay a nickel to get on the streetcar and then pay a penny for the transfer so you get back home. Well, what if you had a family, you had a wife, and you had several children? Was cutting into your food for a whole week. So he asked permission. He said, Dr. Bradby, I'd like to organize a neighborhood church with your permission. And Bradby gave him his blessing. And on the 24th of September, 1919, in the home of a neighborhood mother named Martha McClarty, Pastor Maston gathered with Deacon Albert Gillian, borrowed a deacon from Macedonia, borrowed a deacon from Second Baptist. They had a prayer meeting, and Calvary was born. And Maston and Bradby stayed close. Maston used the very same formula that Bradby did to build Calvary. You come to church, you show up, you help contribute. I'll pick up the phone and call Dr. Bradby, and I'll get you hired at Ford Motor Company. Isn't that wonderful? That Bradby was not so selfish that he kept everything to himself. He shared. When we needed a church, because we were in storefronts for the first couple of years, and we were bursting at the seams. We didn't have any money, didn't have a bank account, didn't have anything. Robert Bradby used his influence and got us the church on Clinton Street. Clinton Street Baptist Church moved out. The white folks moved out of Black Bottom. We could not afford the mortgage. Bradby put up his name so that we could get the mortgage through the American Baptist Society. And before Henry Maston died in 1944, in 1943, we burned the mortgage, paid Robert Bradby back, and the rest is history. But you see how people work together? See, that's what I want to rediscover. I want us to work together. Because if we work together, we are unstoppable. We just are. So anyway, that's the backdrop. James Henry Maston was brilliant. He was able to attract a whole brain trust to Calvary. All of these activists, all these entrepreneurs. And it wasn't just, the upper crust, but I mean people who had barbershops and beauty shops and people who repaired shoes and people who did all kinds of things. The church was full of entrepreneurs and day workers and factory folks and just all kinds of people. I mean, when Paul Robeson was declared persona non grata in this country and all of his livelihood dried up, there were only two churches in this city that were brave enough to have Paul Robeson in concert. One was Hartford on the west side, and the other was Calvary. The FBI came into the church and collected our program and hassled everybody who was on the patron list. Yeah. I mean, so we've always lived on the edge of change. So, the first almost the first year I became pastor, I would lock myself in the church. People thought I was crazy. I'd stay sometimes to 2 or 3 in the morning and I read every bulletin, I read every correspondence, I read because I needed to be baptized into the spirit of the church. I felt that that was the only way I could lead it. And when the people realized that I knew more about the church than they did, sitting up in the pew taking all this for granted, then they started taking me seriously. So anyway,
I don't even know where to pick up on certain things. Number one, I'm glad that you made it clear of how Calvary came out of second. The Second Baptist has this what they call the family tree. It's in their archive room. I have a couple of other copies of it from some of their programs, and it shows First Baptist, Second Baptist came out of first because of racial discrimination, and
right,
then the many ministries that come out of second, which includes Hartford, um, in Calvary. Glad that it wasn't a bitter split. It was just created out of accommodation. So
absolutely.
I'm grateful for that because I know Hartford was as well. There was people
Yeah,
that lived in the West Side, and and also Reverend Hill was causing some controversy with Reverend Bradby because he wasn't for unionizing. So,
right,
but that was also kind of created out of accommodation. So I'm glad that it wasn't a bitter split. Um,
right.
Second off, yes, Second Baptist is way more significant than I think. Because I remember reading about there's this book, Race, Religion, and the Pulpit, that talks about Second Baptist and the things that they did. The stations, them going to the Michigan Central Station was a 24-hour thing. It was committees that they would go up and greet people in the name of the church, offer assistance. But just the whole fact about this sort of loan lending thing that Second Baptist would do for churches, because they kind of did the same thing for Hartford. Hartford, when they were on the old West Side, built their basement first, then built the upper auditorium, and then the what they would call the community house. But that basement was financed through help from Second Baptist. So just that whole thing about how you all got the Clinton Street location was very interesting, very fascinating. I wasn't familiar with that. Uh,
Yep,
that's that story. I mean, it was just, and yeah, and okay, that makes sense because I'm reading the history of Calvary and it talks about how you all offered assistance to the people during the Great Migration, and of course he would get that inspiration from Bradby. Okay,
Bradby presented Brad. Let me say this correctly. Bradby presented as white. He came out of that whole Amherstburg, Ontario group of misogynists. I mean, these were freed, these were emancipated slaves that came from the South, and they settled and they intermarried with the local population. You know, the French Canadians and the First Nations people and that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a whole nother story that I could tell at another time because I used to preach throughout southeastern Ontario, Chatham, Buxton. You know, I had a chance to get to know the offspring of these people. And you know, Bradby did not have to live a life of blackness, but he chose blackness. He chose it. And he may have been conservative, but he still chose blackness. He may have been a little more closely aligned to Booker T. Washington than W.B. Du Bois, and he wasn't hollering Marcus Garvey at all, but he chose blackness. And you have to tip your hat to him for that. And you know, they used to talk about Second Baptist something terrible. You know, the blue vein test. You know, because there was a group of folks at Second Baptist. They were very fair, and if you could see their veins, They were accepted into Boule and they were accepted into this, that, and the other. But he still had, he did not discriminate. I mean, he had all hues of the black uh, spectrum represented in the church. So he was an amazing human being, just absolutely amazing. And I don't know if you've had a chance to reach out to Lawrence Rogers, who is the pastor of Second Baptist now. But I love him because he has baptized himself in the history of the church. He really has, and he wants to do great things, and I want him to succeed. We're close. We talk, and we support each other. He's a good guy.
Yes, he is. Yes, and he wrote a book and he signed my copy of the book. And yes, he knows the history of the church well. Yes, he does. I shared with him my project that I did. I had a project called More Than Sunday, the Social Service Initiatives of Black Churches in Detroit. Second Baptist, of course. You can't talk about Black church history in Detroit without talking about Second Baptist. They were a church that I featured. I did like a historical map. Then it turned into a presentation. And I talked about, the train station situation and, his close connection with Henry Ford, the credit union they used to have, the churches that came out of Second Baptist. Um, and we were supposed to have lunch when we were supposed to talk about it further. But yeah, I shared that with him. And I have a chance to talk with him. The firm that my mom's a part of, they did like a historical report on the addition of Second Baptist that's designed by the black architect I was talking about earlier, Nathan Johnson. Um, so yes, I'm very familiar with him. Yes, just that church is incredible. Second Baptist is incredible.
And I'll say two things. Number one, the whole history of Ralph Bunche coming out of Second Baptist, who obviously was one of the architects of modern Israel. Ralph Bunche was at the United Nations when Israel was born, modern Israel, European Israel, not African Israel. That's another story for another time. That's why there's so much hell going on, because these people who had been oppressed themselves have forgotten. And they came in 1948 to push and shove all of the brown and black folks out of Palestine. But like I said, that's another message for another time. But Ralph Bunche was instrumental in giving these people an opportunity to have a homeland. You know, European Jews were not considered white, not until the 1950s. The United States didn't want them. They wanted to settle in Southern Africa. They didn't think that they would ever get an opportunity to go back to Palestine. And and that's why they got to repent. They got to get themselves together. Because what they are doing right now does not honor God, and it doesn't even make them more safe. So anyway, but yeah, Ralph Bunche grew up in Second Baptist.
was baptized
And
there. Yep. Uh-huh.
yeah, I mean, listen, you're talking about some giants. They came out of that great church. They came out of that great church. The other thing that you may not know, and I don't even know if Pastor Rogers knows this, Coleman Young was so visionary. A. Banks was the pastor of Second Baptist when Coleman Young became mayor. Coleman Young called A. Banks up and said, listen, there is a warehouse right across the street from your church. He said, you could have that for $1. And he said, you could run your community programs. He said, you could build housing. He said, you can do whatever you want to do. A.A. Banks went to the deacons and shared with them. These Negroes told A.A. Banks, we're not in the real estate business. It broke A.A. Banks' heart. 2 weeks later, he had a massive stroke. He had been at that church for 30 years. It would have secured the future of that church. But because of the short sightedness of them, they missed out on all of that. And of course, right across the street used to be Trapper's Alley, which is now Greektown Casino. Second Baptist had the right of refusal for all of that. That's why I say, without a vision, the people perish. And that was a huge blunder. It was a huge blunder. That I mean, they can't recover from that. I mean, right now they have an agreement with the parking garage so that they can accommodate their members and guests on Sunday. So they park in the parking structure and then they walk across because the parking lot next to the church, I don't think it holds 15 or 20 slots. But yeah, that was that was a big mistake. That was a big mistake. And Banks was doing it the right way. I mean, he didn't go behind the deacons and strike up a deal. He went directly to them, thinking that he had a standing and a church was booming, and he was a great preacher, great teacher. But some of those folks, they missed their moment.
Yeah, and that's something. If he would have went behind the backs of those deacons, that would have caused mess. That would have.
Exactly.
What was it? There was the article I saw about Second Baptist. It was like Second Baptist has more splits than a cheerleader or something. It was something. It was something silly like that. And that would they were already splitting, out of each other. So it's just like that would have probably caused a mess. But yes, my pastor was talking about. I go to New Birth Baptist Church in Inkster, Reverend Dr. Joseph A. Stevens, and he was talking about how he thinks there are a lot of mega churches and stuff now because there isn't resistance from deacon boards to fulfill a vision. And so, that's just very, I never heard that story about the warehouse being across the street. Um, what that would have done for them to expand their ministry. They already had the education center that they were trying, that they built. Um, and just what they,
Just to
I
be
own,
listen
go ahead.
just to have control of the property so that when a developer came in they could say this is what we want for the church and this is what we want for the community. If you want to partner with us, it's just, I mean, some that is the kind of, I love the Baptist way, but I know that when if it's not balanced, it can create some real issues. And there are people that just don't vision, and you have to have it. And so your pastor is on to something. I mean, there's no way in the world that Triumph would listen. I know when Triumph started on. Well, I know when Solomon Kinloch was called to Triumph out of New Bethel and was on Littlesdale, and it was just he had a church full of old folks. And I mean, at least he had a base. But Kinloch started by having his family in his corner, and he sacrificed. I mean, he wouldn't take salaries and that, but he'd start bringing local gospel entertainers, kind of prime the pump and get people to come before he'd preach. He developed this formula, and the rest is history. And now he's got campuses all over the place, and he does not have He's not a dictator, but he does not have the turbulence and the struggle that a lot of these traditional churches have. And it does make defy you to find a thriving ministry in the Black context anywhere that has deacons and trustees fighting the preacher. And the same folks that fight their preachers admire these other churches. Why can't we be like Alfred Street in Virginia? Why can't we? Why can't we? Because you're not ready for that. So, I mean, you know, this is why we have to be spirit led. We just have to be spirit led. And it's more than a notion. It is more than a notion. But yeah, your pastor is on to something very, very important. He sees it.
I'm sure he's been through it. Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
And ain't that something too that you all are on Robert Bradley Boulevard, right? You're off that
Yes,
street. That's something. That is something.
I love it.
Mm.
I love it. I love it. His daughter was on what, I don't know if it was the zoning commission, housing commission, or some entity. And she realized that she could not rename Monroe Street, which, was named in honor of one of the former pastors of Second Baptist. She didn't want to do that. So she looked a development that she thought would honor her father's name. So in that Elmwood 3 context, you've been to the church, you see the properties across the street. When I bring people in from around the country, they not so much think about Detroit stereotypically as they used to in the 80s and 90s. It's just all God forsaken and abandoned and broken down and everything. First thing I'll bring a guest in and say, is this church in Detroit or is it in the suburbs? Because they see what's around us. They see this garden of a cemetery. They see this modern high school. And then they see stable housing everywhere. Clean, property maintained, everything. I said, this is Detroit. We are so blessed to be where we are. We really, honestly are. Because if you take a tour of the city and look at the thriving communities, many communities are on their way back. But if you look at where many churches are, if you go up to New Calvary, which came out of Calvary, on Concord, everything around it is collapsed. This is why I know we're blessed. All we have to do is to get ourselves together, and everything else will be well. And it tickles me. We have white people that drop in just anytime, any given Sunday. They'll come in. They like to come for the music. I mean, so if somebody's singing, they want to do that. There is a Canadian family that comes 4 times a year. I mean, they pay the toll now. Since Donald Trump has been acting a fool, we haven't seen them. But, prior to that, they'd come at least 4 or 5 times a year. I mean, dad or sons, sometimes the wife. But they would come and stay for they loved it. And when some of the folks that are stationed at the Coast Guard, not very far from us, they come to worship. I don't change anything that I have to say. Because I just figure they need to hear it too. So, I mean, there's a beautiful freedom in all of that. And I think that people are okay when you're not being evil, not being mean-spirited, not being bitter. But when you are honest and when you are truthful, people will receive that word. And I'm grateful for the freedom that I have had as pastor of the church. It has been it's been wonderful.
Got one more question to ask you. And I just remembered too, those series of church. I'm trying to think about it in my mind, the series of churches that came. Um,
Saint Cyprian, an Episcopal church, came
yeah.
out of Second Baptist too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Hmm. New Light came out of Tabernacle. I'm trying to think of that. Uh, but anyway, do you think architecture can preach in the same way a sermon does?
Yes, I do. It may not require great architecture, but I think that at some point, architecture can inspire. It's like ambiance, and presentation. You go to a restaurant and all your food is sitting on top of each other. It may be delicious, but it looks like confusion. You understand? I mean, there needs to be presentation. And if you go into a restaurant and your water glass is spotted and you see little creatures running about and that kind of stuff, the food may be great, but you're not going to even want to carry out. You're going to carry yourself out. So I think that from the beginning of human existence, places that have been designed to honor God have always understood that ambiance and environment help communicate worship. There are people who may be up against it. When our office hours make the church available, invite the members. I said, if you're in the neighborhood and you just want to come by and sit in the sanctuary and just pray, it's available to you. That's the way. I mean, these places are not supposed to be museums. So why not? I mean, the Catholic Church, they've been on that for a long time. You can go to the local parish. You don't have to go for confession. You don't have to go. You just show up. Somebody lets you in the sanctuary. You go in there and you can light a candle and you can offer a prayer. Of course, they want you to leave some money in the collection box on your way out. It's understood and it's okay. Sometimes you have to change your environment in order to get what you're after. I can't think of a better place where you're attempting to make a life changing decision. You're praying that a loved one will recover. You're praying that someone who has gone astray will come back home. You're praying that you can rebuild a relationship, that you can begin again. I can't think of a better place. That's how I use it. I'm blessed. I have the keys. I can get and the code. I can get in 24 hours a day. And anytime I want to just sit in that sanctuary, I love it. I don't have to lead. It's not even about being in front and having to lead worship all the time. Sometimes I just want to be in the environment. Oh, anyway,
Before I end this recording, is there anything else, people, experiences, or just anything that you think should be remembered or said?
if I think about it, I'll call you back. But I think we've said enough. You got a lot, and you just let wisdom lead you, and whatever you want to include, you can, and whatever winds up on the floor, it just winds up on the floor. I'm okay with it.
Okay, yeah, I definitely want, as you were talking and saying things, I was just thinking like, okay, yes, there's a lot that I want to include in the documentary, but the rest of it, I'm going to upload it to YouTube or something. I'm trying to think about where else I want my oral histories to live. There's a couple other people that I've interviewed before and that I'm going to interview after this. My auntie used to be the secretary of Solomon's Temple, so I'm going to be talking with her. Um, but yeah, this was better than I imagined. Thank you for your insights. This was incredible. Thank you.
You've got to come back. You and your mom need to come back one Sunday when Cheryl Shantae is our psalmist.
Okay.
She was Bishop Bonner's favorite soloist.
Wow.
And Cheryl is still going strong. This woman, oh my God, she is so anointed.
So it wasn't the
And
one who was singing when I was there. It wasn't her.
that's
Oh.
Jackie Turner Robinson.
Okay.
And Jackie is she's a force of life. But Cheryl Shantae is one of our mainstays in our music ministry. And she's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And she's still a part of the Solomon Temple family.
Okay.
She actually attends, I think, another church at this point.
Okay.
But she's usually with us 2 to 3 times a month.
Oh,
And
okay.
she's absolutely amazing, and she can tell you a lot about Solomon Temple.
Okay.
But you got somebody who's been on the inside, and I'm certain that Evangelist Shante knows her.
Probably. Yep.
Yeah, because the listen lived for the hour of truth. That was the
Those, yeah,
television
those
broadcast.
broadcasts. Yep. I got a
Hey
couple of them that
Bonner,
I see online. I'm going to include in the
that
documentary.
Bishop Bonner.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, a church planter, an
Yes. And
educator. I mean,
Harlem and just, he had and these buildings that
South
he built.
Carolina,
Yeah.
West Africa. I
Yeah.
mean, he has a school named after him that he organized in Monrovia, Central City. That
Okay.
school is still thriving.
Nice.
Yeah, Bishop Bonner was my guy,
Yeah.
and he was conservative in some degree,
Mm-hmm.
in some ways theologically,
Mm-hmm.
but he was a race man too. He'd
Mm-hmm.
get up in the pulpit and holler at a minute, Jesus wasn't white. And he'd take them through the Bible.
Mm.
That Bishop Bonner was one of my heroes.
Wow.
I love that man. I loved him, loved him, loved him.
Yeah, my family, my dad's side, they're apostolic and stuff, and they went to Solomon's Temple. My mom's side, we're Baptists, so we know we're mainly Baptist. So it's interesting to see these two. I guess that kind of came out when it came to this whole presentation that I'm doing. It's just to see that duality. And reading on Bishop Bonner is incredible because the building of that church, that was done by the members. They built that, and he was teaching people these trades and stuff. So you could get this
Yes,
training while contributing to your church. It's fabulous. It needs to be this story, stuff like this needs to be told. So
absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
You've been generous with your time, and
yes.
I haven't
You have
minded
been, yes.
sharing.
Thank you, thank you. I'll let
So
you go.
I am grateful.